Hi everyone, it's Fionn here. So my topic for this week is from being a very young age, probably at about the age of 6 or 7, I've been really afraid of death. And as I've went into adulthood, I became increasingly depressed and then increasingly nihilistic in the way that I viewed the world. And I suppose having this belief that nothing really matters may have started as some sort of coping mechanism to the depressive feelings that I had, but it kind of just became a sort of ethos for living generally. I was always battling with myself because with nihilism, to me anyway, seemed as though if you really believed that nothing mattered in life, then why would you care? A true sense of nihilism for me, just this is just my own personal sort of thoughts on it, but a true sense of nihilism for me would then manifest its way into your idea of ethics and morals and judgment. And when I often think of people that are nihilistic, I kind of think that they're slightly amoral because of this fact that they don't care. The result of their actions doesn't mean anything, so everything's fair game at that point. But for me, trying to adopt that certain attitude and live my life true to that was always very contradictory, because although I said there was no meaning in life, it didn't affect me in that way that I was talking about, and it actually just fed into my depression. It wasn't something that set me free, I'd done the opposite. So it's kind of like the paradox of nihilism, where the fact that you care enough to say that you're nihilistic and to say that there's no meaning in life and that you've really thought all this through in a way sometimes can kind of mean that you do care, if that makes any sort of sense. Me then telling myself that nothing meant anything, there was always an undercurrent of dissatisfaction with the fact that there was no meaning to life, and that any way in which I could affect the world around me was so insignificant. Finding it difficult to navigate my way through this conversation without getting really bogged down by it, because it's something that I really struggle with. Trying to overcome this feeling, questioning existence is something that I'm gonna be forever doing, and majority of people probably do the same. But it's trying to find the balance between thinking about it seriously and allowing that to help me grow as a person, but at the same time not letting it completely engulf me and feed into my depression that I'm prone to anyway. I think if you caught me in a different mood and I wasn't feeling too great, I could sit and I could talk about this for a really long time, and I'd be very passionate about it. I'd be very convincing in everything that I was saying to some people maybe, but there would be no ums and buts and really thinking about it and considering everything. It would just sort of flow out of me very easily, but there is this underlying knowing within myself that, not that I'm wrong to think that way, but that it's just not good for me. And I suppose that's the only sort of resolution I can come to, is that it is kind of nihilistic in itself, that if there is no meaning in life, then stop caring about it. So what is my meaning of life? What is my purpose? Then my purpose is just to enjoy myself. And then how does enjoyment take its form? What do I see as having a good life and having fun? And morals is a big thing for me, which really contradicts my nihilistic views. So I want to do the right thing by people. I want to do the right thing by myself. I want to grow. I want to learn. I want to evolve as best as I can. Then why would you want to do that? If you think that once you're dead and gone, that's it. I think that's a problem, is because I was brought up in a religious background, but as I've grown older, it's kind of turned into a more sort of spiritual outlook. Do I truly believe it? Do I truly believe that there's something after life, but I have this thing inside of myself that I've always called blind faith, and I came up with it after listening to a song that I listened to an awful lot when I was in a really dark place, and I was kind of looking for some sort of hope. And when I heard this lyric, I placed a lot of value on it, and I kind of adopted it as my new way of trying to see things. And it kind of gave me a bit of comfort. And the lyric is, don't look down, reasons on the ground. So it's kind of just, I don't know, it just seems very cheesy, but it kind of just forced me in a way to have a bit more faith, but not faith in something external or like a higher power. It was more, have a little bit of faith in yourself. I have faith in myself that I'm not truly nihilistic, and I'm going to find a way out of this, and trust in my intuition. I've really put a lot of work into over the years, and I think it's served me well. I think as long as you've got a sort of decent moral compass, and you're kind of kind-hearted, then trusting your intuition will sort of see you through. Maybe life just is one big distraction from death. Maybe that's all it is. But if I'm going to distract myself from it, I'd may as well put 100% effort into doing that and actually enjoying it. And it can take many forms, you know, finding enjoyment within life, but for me it's just conversations with like-minded people, finding community, which kind of goes back to last week, finding a community of people that kind of understand where I'm coming from, and maybe they share similar concerns, but we're all on a similar page in terms of dealing with it. People that are like me, who are optimistic pessimists, I look for those people, and it's hard to find, just like it is for anyone, no matter who you are. It's hard to come by people that you can really see things like that in common with. But I'm hopeful, and I'm holding on to this idea of blind faith, and I'm holding on to my own personal truth and my own journey, and it may not be important in the grand scheme of things, but I need to face up to the fact that it's important to me. And if it's important to me, then I should nurture my life while I have it. Maybe I just sound like I'm talking a lot of pretentious nonsense, but that's my thoughts for the week. I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone else has got to say, so bye-bye.
You're getting on in years, right? Aren't you afraid of dying?
Why should I be afraid?
Because you won't exist.
So?
That thought doesn't terrify you?
Who thinks about such nonsense? Now I'm alive. When I'm dead, I'll be dead.
I don't understand. Aren't you frightened?
Of what? I'll be unconscious.
I know, but never to exist again?
How do you know?
But it certainly doesn't look promising.
Who knows what'll be? I'll either be unconscious or I won't. If not, I'll deal with it then. I'm not going to worry now about what's going to be when I'm unconscious.
Mom, come out.
Of course there's a God, you idiot. You don't believe in God.
But there's a God, then why is there so much evil in the world? Well, just on a simplistic level, why were there Nazis?
Tell him, Max.
How the hell do I know why there were Nazis? I don't know how the can opener works.
And Finn thought he was being pretentious. Well, apparently no one can out-pretentious me. I thought I'd just include those two things at the start of this video in case anyone wants to follow up on this topic. I really recommend that book, The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker, and that movie was Hannah and Her Sisters by Woody Allen, but pretty much any Woody Allen film is going to cover this topic. And just quickly, I want to acknowledge that you might have noticed from that reading in that video that I've approached this from an atheistic perspective, so I've assumed the non-existence of God. I'm aware that there are alternative views on that, and that's perfectly valid and fine, but considering we're talking about nihilism, I think that nihilism assumes a lack of faith in God. I'm not aware that you can be both nihilistic and a believer, but you know, if you disagree, like, I'd love to hear about that. But yeah, I'm assuming an atheistic perspective today. So with that reading in that video, I just wanted to show how you might reach a state of mind where you start to consider that the world kind of lacks any intrinsic meaning or importance, and that, you know, your life, which is so valuable to you and so meaningful and so filled with, you know, joy and suffering and everything that goes with life, how you might come to the conclusion that it's all kind of arbitrary and cruel and ultimately pointless if there's no God, because God provides meaning to human life and God provides eternality to the human soul. And without God, you know, life is on the temporal plane, and which implies that it has to end at a certain point, which is a terrifying thing. So that's how you get to that nihilistic place, you know, that feeling of what's the point? Why do I bother getting up in the morning if it's all coming to an end? You know, what's the point of love? What's the point of relationships and music and beauty and art and life in general if it all ends and the universe ends? And it just seems cruel and arbitrary. And I've spent a lot of my life in that state of mind, because I was brought up in a religious household. My dad was a minister and my mom was a faithful minister's wife, and my auntie is a fundamentalist Christian. But by the time I was 13, I had pretty much abandoned my faith and was starting to question the meaning behind everything. And you do eventually get to this place that you can't seem to move forward from. It is a really depressing state of mind to not be able to find a reason to get out of bed in the morning and, you know, thinking that everything's meaningless and empty. And then your mind starts to wonder about the implications of nihilism on morality, like wondering if there's any point in doing the right thing or abstaining from doing the wrong thing. If nothing really matters, then, you know, why should you bother? And all these questions start to worry you. But at the end of the day, you're still going through the world behaving in a moral way and, you know, treating the world as if it contained meaning and that your relationships retain meaning. And there seems to be a contradiction between, you know, the place you've gotten to logically and your subjective experience of the world, which you still find meaningful. The disparity between those two things comes from the fact that it's impossible to live your life constantly worrying about your place in eternity. You can only live your life in the here and now, and worrying about, you know, existing forever is just not possible in a temporal life. Nihilism isn't an endpoint. I think nihilism has to be on the way to something else, because you can't live your life burdened by the knowledge that you die, that you don't have any place in eternity, because there's nothing you can do about it. And I know that sort of philosophically at 3 a.m. in the morning, that's something that really troubles you. But in your day-to-day life, I mean, what's there to be done about it? It's like the father in the Woody Allen clip at the start of the video. He says, you know, why should I worry about death? I'll deal with it when I get to it. I mean, there's no point in worrying about it. I think that's the attitude that we have to adopt. Yeah, maybe it is true that we die and we rot, and every relationship and, you know, every beautiful thing that we've experienced in our lifetime, maybe it all comes to nothingness. And that's a terrifying thought, but what are you going to do about it? You can't do anything. I guess the answer is that you just have to find a way to be okay with it and to enjoy life while you're here and to worry about it later. Also, just on this topic of morality and nihilism, I don't think they're necessarily incompatible. I mean, I know there's such a thing as nihilistic morality, which is the view that there is no such thing as morality. But if you're just nihilistic in general and believe that everything kind of lacks any intrinsic meaning and nothing matters, I don't think that that implies that you should stop caring about treating other people well. In fact, I think that if there is no God, then that's all the more reason for us to be kind to each other and try to ensure that we minimize suffering as much as possible, because if there's no God, there's no cosmic justice, there's no recompense in heaven. It's all just empty suffering. And I really think that that's all the more reason to be a moral person. Where that morality comes from is another topic, but just in terms of how you feel that you should behave, given the truth of nihilism, I think there's very good reasons to be a good person, for sure. So I don't have that much advice on how to get out of this abyss of nihilism, but I know that you do have to get out of it because you can't stay there. And I know that from personal experience, because feeling this way has made me stop engaging with the world. And, you know, my sister said that it kind of paralyzes me and makes me not strive to achieve things that perhaps other people would strive to achieve. So it is a toxic mentality. I'm really interested to hear from Emery and from some other people on, you know, their take on this topic. This video was hard to make. I'll see you next week. Bye.
My experience with nihilism, my relationship with nihilism is very long, romantic history. I've been in mental rehabilitation facilities with just thoughts of suicide because life felt like a movie. Life felt like it wasn't real. I had done a lot of bad things in my eyes. By the time I was 14, I had lied, cheated, stealed, and drugged my way into mental facility. And it didn't stop there. But I'm an addict. And that's something separate. I mean, which that's debatable. But from a very young age, I really felt like I needed to know why, and I think I realized at a young age also that I was never going to know, and that there was no point because nothing made sense. Nothing was as I wanted it to be, and it never was going to be, and it was never going to make sense, and everything was just a movie, and it was directionless, and I'm being reminded of Ani DeFranco right now. Can I be that pretentious asshole and say that life is a B-movie, it's stupid and it's strange, it's a directionless story and the dialogue is lame, but in the he said, she said, sometimes there's some poetry if you turn your back long enough and let it happen naturally. I'm just going to jump right to the end of this and make my point right off the bat, that I have found so much comfort in what was initially my reason for suicide. The idea that nothing is real is now a huge source of comfort to me. It's a very drastic thing to say. It's a very narcissistic thing to say, that I know that nothing is real. But that's what I know. From my perspective, I can't say, when I die, I'm going to heaven. When I die, I'm going to be born again. When I die, there's going to be a legacy, and my children will be kings and queens, and I don't know. That's not real. And I made this video before, and I got into this long talk about Buddhism and the Dharma, and how the story of self just is a story, and letting go is where you'll find growth. But that's not what this is about. This isn't about me telling you how to be happy. This is just my experience with nihilism. And to be honest, like I said, I have had a romantic relationship with it. I'm very attached. I was very attached to my nihilism. and it has evolved into this beautiful non-attachment. And it's not that nothing matters, and it never was that nothing mattered, it's just that nothing made sense. But when I came to terms with the fact that nothing makes sense, it was lifted. When I stopped asking why and started doing, and loving and giving and coping, it changed. My whole life changed. And maybe that's because that's the path that was laid out for me, but look at my face right now. No, that's not a thing that I believe. I think that it takes a lot of work, and I think that the question and the idea that life is abstract and it's all nothing is a really, really evolved, intelligent perspective to start out from and to be in. But it doesn't have to be a negative thing, you know. It becomes negative when you're looking at it from a negative perspective, because if you acknowledge that hey, maybe there's no point, then you can do whatever you want. And maybe whatever you want, if you're a sociopath, is to steal and whatever sociopaths do. You know, people who don't have a conscience. That's, but you can actually live from the most honest place in your heart, and that's okay. You don't have to believe anything that anybody imposes on you. I mean, this is as real as it gets for me. I have not conformed to anything recently, and that's amazing. And the meditations I do, I'm not going to get into like this religious thing. I'm not a religious man, but when I sit and I'm just there and I'm feeling my hands and feet, and I can let go of the wrongs that I've done or the wrongs that have been done to me, and look at life from a curious, forgiving, open place right here, right now, then it doesn't matter that it doesn't matter. Because, like, there is an inherent good in my perspective. You know, Finn said maybe nobody's good and nobody's bad, but I think that there is good, and there's a lot of corruption, but basically it's good. I'm going over 8 minutes now. What I really wanted to say, the reason I really wanted to call dibs on this, is because I really believe that my sense of peace and the way I've come to peace with myself, and the reason I'm so excited to live the rest of my life, is because my nihilism has evolved into an awakening. And that may not make sense to anybody else, but it's very real to me.
Let's go out back and plant a family tree.